Guess we'll get going this morning. We're in Isaiah chapter 39. And if you remember the last chapter that we looked at, we had Hezekiah. Hezekiah was dealing with a sickness, in which as we went through that chapter, we see he actually pulled through that sickness and was blessed with good health. So, chapter 39 is following up after that series of events, in which now we see Hezekiah made some mistakes. He had some poor choices of judgment that actually put him in error. Which goes to show nobody's perfect. You could be doing your very best, and next thing you know, you make a poor choice in life that, maybe takes you back a few steps, and you just got to pick yourself back up again and try to get back to where you were. And Hezekiah is a good example of that. So, starting off in this chapter, it's not a very long chapter. It's only 8 verses. But this whole chapter, we're going to talk about the error that took place with Hezekiah, and then we're going to talk about a future event that's going to come on the people, and basically we're looking at a prophecy, a prediction of what's going to take place. So, King Hezekiah's illness and recovery basically reached the ears of the Babylonians. And we have one individual in particular here, Merodach Baladan. So there's some interesting history with Babylon and the current crisis and powerhouse of Assyria that's trying to take over everything. So brief history is Assyria actually took control of Babylon, and Merodach Baladan during this part of history is seeing an opportunity to go back and basically take Babylon and part away from the Assyrian authority. So it says at verse 1, it says, "At that time, Merodach Baladan, the son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present to Hezekiah." Now, I have some notes of some brief history here of the events, and that may help you understand as we start into this chapter. So, we have the incident in this chapter is used by Isaiah to introduce the coming of the Babylonian captivity, which is basically what this chapter is going to be about. We're about to go into a new powerhouse for the world, and that's going to be Babylon, but that's going to be years away from Hezekiah's day. So Merodach Baladan, king of Babylon, also known as in the Akkadian text as Marduk, Apel, and Dinah. So Marduk, if you guys remember our studies in Daniel, Marduk was a name of a god for the Babylonians. Well, Merodach Baladan was also known as Marduk, Apal, Edina. So he conquered Babylon in 721 BC with the help of the Elamites and ruled there for about 11 years. And he was driven out by Sargon II of Assyria, which we talked about a little earlier on in the book of Isaiah. So Sargon II was one of those kings of Assyria. So Sargon II drove him out in 710 BC. So after the death of Sargon, here's where Merodach-Baladan found his opportunity to try to go back in and take Babylon from Assyria. So Sargon II dies. So that king's out of the way. So now here we are. We're going to take back our land of Babylon. So this is where Merodach-Baladan is coming in at. So he attempted to basically rally up a bunch of supports. And actually, the interesting thing here is one of the supports that he had in mind of rallying was King Hezekiah, because he knew what all King Hezekiah had just went through, and he was going to seek help there. But instead, he actually saw all the treasures and all the riches that Jerusalem had, and that Hezekiah was showing them, and he decided, you know what, I think we want to take this for us. So this is the layout of what's happening here. So currently, after Sargon II, the person that took Sargon's spot of king of Assyria was Sennacherib. So we've read about Sennacherib. So that's the current king. That's the one that Merodach-Baladan is now going to want to kind of go up against and take Babylon back. And that was going to be his kingdom. So here we have Merodach-Baladan rebelling against Assyria to establish himself as king over Babylon. And all of that, came shortly after that northern kingdom being taken over, the fall of the northern kingdom. So here we have in verse 1, it says, "At that time, Merodach-Baladan, the son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present to Hezekiah. For he heard that he had been sick and was recovered." So off the bat, it seems like, well, that's a pretty nice thing for him to do. Hezekiah was really sick. He recovered from that. It almost looks like Merodach-Baladan has some concern there. He's sending letters and a present. He's sending some representatives over there to talk to Hezekiah. And basically, this is what I love about it, is you can make connections with other books in the Bible as to these events taking place. So these representatives were basically sent to congratulate Hezekiah on his recovery from a pretty serious illness. And if you go back to 2 Chronicles chapter 32, which we've talked about quite a bit, we have some connections here. In 2 Chronicles chapter 32, let's see here, verse 30. "The same Hezekiah also stopped the upper watercourse of Gihon, brought it straight down to the west side of the city of David, and Hezekiah prospered in all his works. Howbeit," verse 31, "howbeit, in the business of the ambassadors of the princes of Babylon, who sent unto him to inquire of the wonder that was done in the land." Okay, so here we have in 2 Chronicles 32:31, it mentioned about the ambassadors of the princes of Babylon being sent to Hezekiah to inquire of the wonders that were done in the land. Also to inquire of the recovery of Hezekiah's sickness, and that now he's better. So we take that out of 2 Chronicles chapter 32, in verse 31 about them being sent to Hezekiah. And here we have a connection in Isaiah chapter 39 and verse 1 to where indeed Merodach Baladan, the son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present to Hezekiah. So, and later on we're going to see he sent his messengers. Well, his messengers brought the letter and the present. So it goes on to say in 2 Chronicles 32:31, it says, God left him to try him that he might know all that was in his heart. So here's where we're going to see all that was in Hezekiah's heart. You know, how was he on the inward side, the inward man? Well, we're going to see here. So in verse 2 of Isaiah 39, it says, Hezekiah was glad of them. He was excited. Think about Hezekiah and the city of Jerusalem, and you've got this well-known Babylonian society that suddenly has some interest in you. So it would be a little bit exciting for Hezekiah to be noticed by the king of Babylon, that he would send his messengers here. Hezekiah was glad of them. It says he showed them his house of precious things, the silver and the gold, the spices, the precious ointment, and all the house of his armor, and all that was found in his treasures. And it even goes on to say, there was nothing in his house, nor in all his dominion, that Hezekiah showed them not. So, you may ask, well, what was the error? What did Hezekiah do wrong? Well, in verse 2, it tells us what he did. It tells us that basically he knew that he had these riches, he was proud of these riches, and he wanted to show off these riches. Basically, it was a weakness to flattery. He was flattered by the Babylonians wanting to come to him. And while they were there, he wanted to basically show off all that he had. To the point was there was nothing in his house and in all his dominion that Hezekiah showed them not. He was bragging. He was a bit prideful. He was pleased to receive the letters and the gift from the king of Babylon. You know, it made him feel like he's something. And then in verse 3 it says, Then came Isaiah the prophet unto King Hezekiah. And Isaiah says unto him, Well, what said these men? From whence came they unto thee? Hezekiah said, They're come from a far country, even a country unto me, even from Babylon. And Isaiah said, Well, what have they seen in thine house? And Hezekiah answered, All that is in mine house have they seen. There is nothing among my treasures that I have not showed them. This is where Hezekiah was going wrong. The built up, I guess, the ego, the proudness of the material things that were, I guess, gathered up over time. And he wanted to show them off. He wanted to show these Babylonians, hey, we're not some little rinky-dink city. We got some stuff of our own. Let me show you what we got. So, this was the error that Hezekiah had. And obviously now we've got Isaiah asking them the questions. Who were they? Where did they come from? And what exactly did you show them in your house? And this is where we get into now the predicting of the Babylonian captivity. And this is where we can make some connections back in Chronicles. We can make some connections over into the book of Daniel. And we've studied all this with Babylon before. It says in verse 5, "Then said Isaiah to Hezekiah, Hear the word of the Lord of hosts." Okay, Hezekiah, you've been doing really good. But you did make some error here in your judgments. You allowed these Babylonians to come in, and you literally threw out and showed them all the things that you had stored up. Pretty bad judgment. It says, "Behold, the days come, that all that is in thine house, all these things, that you thought was going to be a good idea to show them, that which thy fathers have laid up in store until this day, every bit of it shall be carried to Babylon. Nothing shall be left, saith the Lord." So, all the treasures shown to the Babylonian visitors, they were going to be carried away right back to Babylon. And along with some of the descendants, which we see also in this verse. Verse 7, "And thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away. They shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon." So not only, Hezekiah, will all the material riches be taken away to Babylon, but even some of the descendants are going to be taken away to Babylon. And you brought it on yourself. You wanted to show them, you wanted to brag, you had some pride built up, and now this is what's going to happen. And again, in 2 Chronicles 2:31, it said that God left them to try them, that he might know what was in his heart. And a lot of times when you really dig deep to what's in a man's heart, you're going to find some faults. And the reason is none of us are perfect. None of us are perfect, and we all have our weaknesses. One of the weaknesses of Hezekiah was he was flattered by the Babylonians coming, and he was an open book. Hey, look guys, here's what all we got. Well, that displeased the Lord. So, the fulfillment of Isaiah's prediction of this Babylonian captivity, we've studied it before, but all this occurred around the 586 BC era. And matter of fact, the fulfillment of the prophecy can be found in 2 Chronicles. If you skip over to chapter 36, and I'm trying to think if we really want to read the whole chapter. It may not be a bad idea. Yeah, you know what? It wouldn't be a bad idea. Let's read 2 Chronicles 36, because here's where we're going to get into the carrying away of the vessels that was being predicted here by Isaiah. We've got 23 verses. Maybe we can split this up into two people. It says, "Then the people of the land took Jehoahaz, the son of Josiah, and made him king in his father's stead in Jerusalem. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. And the king of Egypt put him down at Jerusalem, and condemned the land of 100 talents of silver and talents of gold. And the king of Egypt made Eliakim, his brother, king of Judah, and Jerusalem, and turned his name to Jehoiakim. And Necho took Jehoaz, his brother, and carried him away. Let's see here. Hold on a minute. That's going back a little too far here. Okay. Yeah, let's skip. We don't have to read that whole chapter. Let's skip over to verse 17. Okay. This is where the future prediction. So this is in Hezekiah's future. Okay. This isn't going to happen during his days, but it's the future for his people here. So in 2 Chronicles 36, starting in verse 17, here's where we're getting into that destruction of Jerusalem and the whole carrying away of the vessels and the whole Babylonian captivity coming into place. So verse 17, therefore he brought upon them the king of the Chaldees, who slew their young men with the sword in the house of their sanctuary, and had no compassion upon young man or maiden, old man, or him that stooped for age. He gave them all into his hand. And all the vessels of the house of God, great and small, and the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king and his princes, all these he brought to Babylon. And they burnt the house of God, they brake down the wall of Jerusalem, they burnt all the palaces thereof with fire, and destroyed all the goodly vessels thereof. And them that escaped from the sword carried he away to Babylon, where they were servants to him and his sons until the reign of the king of Persia. So, the prediction that's being made here to Hezekiah of, behold, the days come that all that is in thine house and that which thy fathers have laid up in store until this day shall be carried to Babylon. Nothing shall be left, saith the Lord. And thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away. They shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. So the prediction that's being told to Hezekiah is recorded in 2 Chronicles 36. And to get to the meat of it, around verse 17 and following, to see this actually played out. And a matter of fact, as I was reading that, it reminded me when we were studying the book of Daniel. If you go to the book of Daniel in chapter 1, you'll also see some references of Babylon carrying away the vessels. Let's see here. In Daniel chapter 1, let's see, in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim. So, if you go back to 2 Chronicles 36, you'll see Jehoiakim being talked about. In the 3rd reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. So the besieging taking place here in Daniel chapter 1 is the same besieging that's recorded in 2 Chronicles 36. And it's the same besieging that's being predicted by Isaiah here in chapter 39, verses 6 and 7, as Isaiah is talking to Hezekiah. So now we come to the root of what really happened here to cause this sort of punishment taking place, or what played a big part in it. One of the big parts was the pride, the ego, the flattery, the wanting to show off everything you've got, and Hezekiah did that. And now he's being told, you know what, your people are going to face this time to where these Babylonians that you just showed off to is going to come in and take all this stuff. Not only the stuff, but the people. So again, in Daniel 1, verse 2, it says, "And the Lord gave Jehoiakim king of Judah into his hand, with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God." That would be the gods of the Babylonians. That would be their god that they call Marduk. So all this can be connected throughout different books in the Bible as far as how this played out. Let's see here. I have a note here. The predictions form a bridge from the earlier chapters of Isaiah. So yeah, that's right. So all the way up until about a couple chapters ago, we were talking about Judah and Assyria. What's going to happen is we're going to have a shift of focus to where now we're going to continue to talk about Judah. We're going to start to get into more detail now as we go through the book of Isaiah about Babylon now coming on the scene. So we have a bit of a bridge here in these chapters that we studied over the last couple weeks, connecting the Assyrians and all those issues to now it's going to be the Babylonians and all the issues that the people are going to have with them. So that's the direction we're headed in there as we go forward. Now this is interesting. So as we look at these verses, so we already know that Hezekiah was flattered and he wanted to show off what he's got. And verse 8 is interesting because it says, Then said Hezekiah to Isaiah, it says, "Good is the word of the Lord which thou hast spoken." Okay, so he accepts it. Okay, Isaiah, I accept it. Good's the word of the Lord. I believe that's going to happen. He said, "Moreover, for there shall be peace and truth in my days." Now, when I read this, I found it kind of interesting that here it is, Isaiah is basically pointing out to Hezekiah what he did wrong, and that type of attitude was not the best, okay? You shouldn't have done what you did, Hezekiah. Here's what's going to happen to all the stuff you showed off and even the descendants. So he's being told this, and he accepts it, but the thing that I find interesting is he said, "Moreover, for there shall be peace and truth in my days." So, in my mind, when he would have heard this news, maybe he would have been in more of a mournful state, almost sackcloth and ashes type situation, but it's almost like he's still looking at it as, okay, well, that's in the future, but as of right now, hey, I don't have to worry about that because I'm in peace in the days that I'm going to be alive. This is something that's going to happen on down the road. And it almost seems like it could be that's still that mentality of having a bit of pride built up in all the things that were done in his days that he still has there in his heart. Any thoughts on that? And I know sometimes I can really meditate on something a little more than I need to. Oh, let's go there. Where's that at?
2 Kings 20, 18, 19.
So you're thinking 2 Kings 19? 2019. Okay, so wonder if we should back up a little bit. Verse 19, and said Hezekiah and Isaiah, good is the word of the Lord which thou hast spoken. And he said, it is not good if peace and truth be in my, is it not good that peace and truth be in my days? So that was his response to Isaiah. Isaiah told him about, in verse 17, being carried into Babylon and nothing being left. In verse 18, about the descendants being taken away. And then verse 19, Hezekiah said unto Isaiah, good is the word of the Lord which thou hast spoken. And he said, is it not good if peace and truth be in my days? And the rest, and then it doesn't show a response to that question. So yeah, I mean, I guess you need to kind of stay away from the speculation of it all, but we don't really have a response to the question that was asked back as to know truly where Hezekiah's mind was, as far as he understood what he had did wrong, or if he was still on the fence of whether he thought he really did anything wrong, or whether he did think he did something wrong. What we got here? 1033. You know, I was going to read a bit of an outline of this chapter, and I'm undecided if I really want to do that, so I don't bore anybody. I don't guess I will. There just really wasn't much to dig too deep into with this chapter. It was pretty straightforward with Hezekiah and where his mind was and what he did, and then the introduction of the coming Babylonian captivity that's in the future of the people. And really, we'll get into the meat of it all as we get into the next chapters, as we continue on in the book of Isaiah. But again, I would encourage everyone to go back and get yourselves really geared into what's happening with the history here. And that's going to be in the book of 2 Kings, chapters 18 through 20. That's going to be in the book of 2 Chronicles, especially chapter 32, and following all the way through chapter 36. And once you get that down and you understand more of what's happening, and maybe even venture over into the first 4 chapters of the book of Daniel to see what it was like when those descendants went into Babylonian captivity, and to learn about Nebuchadnezzar, who was that Babylonian king that came in and did this. All that's going to make it easier for you to understand the warnings that are taking place here towards Judah and what they faced. So, if there's no other questions or comments or additions to the chapter 39 of Isaiah, then I'm going to say that that's going to end class for this chapter.